Hello everyone, this is Nischit here from GeekyAnts, a senior software engineer, and I've been working with GeekyAnts for almost 3 years now. And today we are going to discuss on a very crucial topic and a very amazing feature in Next.js, internationalization. Let's get started with it. So what we are going to explore today is creating multilingual applications using Next.js. So what is multilingual? Multilingual basically means supporting multiple languages in an application. So for example, if you are someone who is creating websites only in English and you plan to expand it to certain other countries, certain other regions as well, then in this case, multilingual applications uh, are the most basic, are the features that are going to help you to cross that boundary. What it basically does is that it helps to unlock a lot of global audiences. It also makes the deliver experience seamless. So if you are just going to another new region, okay, with a different language as well as different currencies and so on, then it makes it very easier as well. Right? So this presentation basically explores how we are building the web applications with using Next.js, using the multilingual, using internationalization as well as localization. So why go multilingual? We currently have about 5.3 billion users globally, and out of them, 75% are preferring native languages. So if you want to go into countries like Japan, then they prefer language Japanese. And if they want to also use a website that you have, they would definitely want a very native feeling to how they are going to browse in it. Suppose it's a website that helps them buy certain things, then they would want to view all the content that is there in a specific way, right? In Japanese itself, so that they feel at home and they feel much more comfortable understanding the various terminologies that are associated and so on. Also, a lot of users, they avoid English only websites. So for example, if it is a social website, and the user doesn't know exactly English, then what we are basically doing is that we are limiting them from communicating a lot, right? So this is also a major blockade or sort of a barricade that makes your website region defined, right? It doesn't allow you to expand as much as you want. The very next thing that comes across is that the world is very diverse, and when we want to expand, the much more we provide comfortability to user, the much better we get the experience back as well. So what is internationalization? Right, IITN is designing software in a way that you keep the region in mind, right? Any sort of changes that are made that helps, helps communicate with the users of a certain region better is internationalization, right? And no code changes would be needed in this case. It's localization is more of adapting your product to the region. Now, if let's say, for example, as we discussed earlier, Japanese, right? If you want to communicate with the users of Japan, then you need to know Japanese. So this way, when we are communicating with a certain region, we will add the language, any sort of content that is that would be translated to it, right? Also, we need to make sure that the translations aren't the only thing that will change with the region. There is also dates on how the date is communicated to the user in a region. Also, there are currencies that are there. For example, what we use over here in India, it is comma for every thousand and so on. But in other regions of Europe, particularly Spain, right, the users communicate the currencies are in denominations of dot instead of comma for thousands and so on. So these are very intricate uh, things that we notice in different regions, and that's what makes them unique. And if we want to enter a market, or if we want to enter a region and support them, then this is how we'll do it. And when we come to implementation of internationalization for a region, the ideal framework is IIT, right? Next.js has a very built-in support for all of these things. There is localized routing based on prefixes. There is also automatic language detection as well. So for example, if you have set the browser language to be a certain language, then it will detect it automatically and it will load accordingly as well. Also, you can optimize the pages as well. So what happens in certain regionalization or internationalization is that there is a limitation, as in your any metadata that is there, it is in a certain way. So search engines, they define it as, okay, this page is only in English and is only limited to certain region. But when you add translations and other things, as well as Next.js internationalization, it also makes the metadata translated to that specific instance. So you don't have to worry about the SEO optimization, as well as your website ranking much more better on the search engine. We also have fallback strategies in over here. So if, let's say, any sort of translation that didn't go through, you forgot to add certain things, or there was certain miscommunication that happened, there is a very graceful fallback to all of these things. So you can add a fallback to English or other region, and so on. So there is a very robust feature using Next.js built-in internationalization. Right? The capabilities, they simplify all the features that comes up with internationalization. So what is a core toolset that we have for this? Obviously, there is a Next.js built-in support, but also there is Next I18, right? So this is the uh, a standard one, a very well-defined package that helps us with this process. Right? We'll go through it in our website. So currently, what we have over here is a specific website that we can explore. The very first step, let's say for example, I've already set up the process for this. The very first setup for setting up our application is the npx create next app. I've already done it, and I've added the specific translations as well. So we'll begin with the translation, which is adding the translation for this. So I've added the common page, that landing page, as well as about and so on. So these are the pages that we'll be exploring. So I've added the translations for each of these. Now, if you notice, I've added them in a nested way. That is, the common is the very initial one, right? If it is something like a header or a footer, the translations would remain common. So you can add it in a separate file in the en1, or you can keep it in the en.json itself, right? And there is add title as well. So the title of the application, based on the pages, you have landing, there is about, and so on. So each of the pages you can keep it nested, so that it's easier to make changes, as well as it's easier to navigate through it, right? Similarly, I've added the Spanish support, right? So all of the translations have been done and they have been added away. Now this is messages, and this is the static content that we have. As in, let's say if there is a button label or anything, right? We already know these are the content that would be there in my website, and I can do it accordingly. The very next thing is a basic I18 support, right? I'll create a folder called I18 in the source folder, and then add the navigation.ts. Right? What we are using over here is Next-INTL internationalization package for this. Right? Just for support concerns, I'm using the Next internationalization over here. So the middleware, the very initial page that we're going to explore is the navigation page. So this basically helps us set up the basic navigation support for path name, for router, and other things. Since we are going with the app based routing, right? So any sort of path, any sort of page change that will happen, it will happen using the path. But we'll also add the language prefix as well. So for example, if our initial page is in English and we are going to Spanish page, then we'll simply change it to /es instead of en. So this way we'll also be able to share the URL to the concerned person or whoever we want to share with, and they'll be able to directly go to the Spanish page instead of going through the page of the English one. We'll also add the request file, right? So any sort of request that is made, like it totally corresponds to the let's say for example, if the page request has been made in English and other things, now the replacement of all the messages and so on, this is done through this file. So it will check, okay, what is the message that I have to give, or JSON file that I have to pass. So Based on the locale that we have, it will pass the appropriate file. Right? Routing basically helps us to add the support for languages. Do I support only English or Spanish? Let's say for tomorrow, if I want to add German support as well, I can add it over here, right? I can add simply the folder name and then add it in the messages. So this is just a 2-minute change, and you will be ready with the changes for German as well, right? It's that simple. So once we have successfully set up our I18N folder, then we'll move on to middleware. Now middleware basically, whenever you change any sort of routes or anything happens, it checks if there needs to be a prefix that has to be added or not. So for example, if it is something like an API or any other folder that any other change that is happening, right? So in these cases, that doesn't need to be uh, a prefix that has to be added. So we'll add the prefix accordingly only for the ones that we do need. Right? We'll add the create middleware next internationalization, and we'll match it over here. We'll also add a matcher, so you can change the matcher based on your specific concerns. For example, if you want to add a matcher for based on images or for a certain folder that you want to skip, you can add it over here. Now, once you have done all of these changes, the next change is our next config. We have to wrap the current next config in the next internationalization plugin. So this helps us with the internationalization changes that are happening and so on. So any sort of config will also be added in there. Now, once we have done all of these, we'll start with the application part. So in our application, we have locale. The locale is we'll create a folder in square brackets locale, so that if en comes in or if es comes in or if any sort of page comes in, right, we'll able to capture the parameter. So for example, if it is an about page, we'll capture the parameter, the locale, and then use it. And let's say the other change that we have to add is our layout page. Our main layout page would look like this. Like we'll remove the page that we have on the outside, and we'll have the layout page as it is. After that, the layout page inside our locale has to look like this. We'll add the client provider and has locale, okay, to check okay if the locale is supported or not. If it is not supported, we'll redirect it to a not found page. Otherwise, the routing would happen accordingly. So we'll wrap it inside the next internationalization client provider. So once that is done, our page would look like this. We'll have a header and other changes. So how do we use it exactly? So let's say if we'll use the get translations over here. Okay, since this is not a client page, we'll use this. You can also use translations. So get translations, now landing. Once I check landing, we'll come over here. So what is landing? Okay, landing, it corresponds to the landing page. So the translations related to that will be fetched much faster if you have a lot of keys in there, right? It's much better to specify the key name so that you'll get it much easier. So const t get translations. Once this has been done, we'll use the t, okay, in this case t, the title, and we'll get the title over here and other things. Similarly, if it is something like a common one, you can do it so this maintains a cleaner code, as well as the changes that are made are much more visible to us. And we can understand, okay, if the translations are coming from common or if they're coming from landing. Okay. So this can be made either ways. We can also remove the key over here and just go on with the t, right? So except if we do this change, we'll also have to add landing dot over here. That's only change that we'll need to add. However, using the key over here makes us avoid this, and the code looks much more cleaner, and the keys correspond only to the ones that we have in the page. Yeah, once that is done, we can also add it in the above page. So over here, I have used translations. You can use this as well. Okay, so any sort of change that is there, like it behaves in a similar way over here as well. The only change, right? Once all of this has been done, Right? The issue that comes up is that the internationalization by Next.js, this plugin, this package doesn't really support the static very well, right? So that is to overcome this issue. What we have is the const locale, like this specific code. So this code helps us in the static rendering part of our page. So any rendering change that has been done, this will make sure that it has been re-rendered and our translation works as expected. So we'll go through a demo as well of the application to understand how our application behaves once the changes have been done. So since our page exists in EN as of now, so there is not a redirect added. So in this case, what we can do is that we can add a redirect. So anytime it comes us to apps the layout page, we can add a redirect over here so that it can go away. However, we have successfully loaded our application. So let's say we'll switch the language to Espanol or Spanish. Our change happens, right? So this is the change for our application common, right? So if you check, this is a key that is there, and any sort of changes in the key would also happen. Let's go to the about page. Now if we go to the about page, we also see that it is in Spanish as well. So we didn't have to specifically go to that page, and the changes have been done. Let's change back to English, and that's it. And that is the most simplest way that we can add internationalization to our application. So the setup and the configuration has been explained. So what are the best practices? So one of the best practices is never to hardcode the string directly in the components. So instead of using it in the components directly, we should make it sure that the keys are added inside the specific language messages key, right? If we want something like a pluralization, for example, depending on in certain languages, on count change the nouns don't change. However, in certain languages like English, we have that, okay, if it is one chicken, then it's a chicken, but if there are more than 3 or 4 chicken, then it's chickens, there are 4 chickens, and so on. However, in different languages, the nouns don't really change based on count. Sometimes the nouns do change based on how much there are, right? So to manage that, we can handle it in translations as well. We should also organize the namespaces for based on each languages, because English also varies depending on the region. You can have a US based English as well as you can have a UK based English. So you can add EN-US and also EN-UK. You can also check the will layout to make sure that the right to left language, right, Arabic, is also supported. So any sort of layout change would have to be make sure that whenever the language is translated to Arabic, it is supported as well. That is how you build a multilingual application using Next.js. So what are the benefits of creating the multilingual application is that you'll get a global reach, your user experience would be much more improved, and you'll also get SEO boost along with it based on a certain regions. Also, the key steps that are involved is at the setup, the routing based on the languages, the translation files, as well as the language switcher. So in our case, we use buttons. However, if you want to use something like a drop down, that can be done as well. Thank you for listening to this talk. Have a nice day ahead. Thank you.